Welcome to another episode of Writing on Caffeine, the podcast where you can come along on a journey with a father and daughter as we attempt to write our first novels. I am Jonathan Franzone, and this is my daughter.
I'm Ragan, also Franzone.
Tonight we are recording at my house again, just for scheduling reasons, and I am drinking the beverage of Captain Picard from Star Trek. It is Earl Grey tea, hot. What are you drinking?
I'm drinking a half watered down Dr. Pepper from Chick-fil-A.
Yummy. It's a bit later when we're recording this, so we don't have coffee. So how's the writing coming, Ragan?
I actually wrote things today.
Yay!
So I've got 5 scenes done.
Good job.
Out of the 30 that I have planned.
I was fully planning on not asking this question during this recording because I didn't want to go through the pain of expressing how I haven't written anything again. But then you told me you did write something, so I thought we would include it.
Woo-hoo.
So, good job. Today we're going to talk about good guys.
Woohoo!
Or
protagonists.
That's right, technically protagonists. So the protagonist is the good guy. He or she is the hero and the central focus of your story. So last time we talked about the antagonist or the bad guys and what makes a good antagonist. So today we're going to talk about what makes a good protagonist.
Right
So
on.
we have 10 items here. I'll take the first one,
All right.
which is relatability. So while your protagonist doesn't need to be universally relatable, they should resonate with your target audience. They could exhibit traits that readers identify with, such as particular strengths, weaknesses, or experiences. This helps readers to emotionally invest in their journey. So as I'm writing middle grade, obviously my protagonist needs to be
Young.
about 12 or 13.
Right.
So-
YA, you're going to have mid to high end teenagers.
Right. Angsty teenagers.
Yeah. And then obviously, I mean, I feel like epic fantasy can go either way, really.
Yeah, epic fantasy really can be a broad spectrum. It just has to be epic.
Yeah. For the most part, you tend to kind of shoot towards your target audience age because, that's how your readers relate.
Relate. Yeah, so number 2, you want to take that?
Yeah. So number 2 is flaws. Nobody is perfect, and your protagonist shouldn't be either. Character with flaws is more believable and relatable. These flaws can also drive character development and conflict within the story.
Very true. Yeah, nobody wants to read about a perfect character.
That would be really boring.
Yeah. So a character or protagonist that had a lot of flaws for me was Frasier.
Ugh.
In the show Frasier Crane, he is his worst enemy, his own worst enemy. Like, all of his problems come from him.
I cannot stand that show.
Yeah. So number 3 is growth. One of the most satisfying elements of a story can be watching a character grow and change. A compelling protagonist often has a character arc, experiencing personal growth and change as they confront obstacles and challenges. So we've talked about this in the past with characters and how to build them so that they do grow and develop.
Yep.
And they're not just stagnant, the same thing. One of the story writing formats is the hero's journey. And so that's a big part of the hero's journey is you have this ordinary character who's at home. He's thrust into this epic situation and he has to go on this massive journey. Could be physical or just emotional, spiritual, whatever. But throughout the entire thing, they're changed. And then when they come back home, then they're a new person.
An example of characters that do not grow.
Yeah.
I might get a little bit of hate here, but
Bring it.
the Avengers.
The Avengers. Okay.
Literally every Avengers movie is like Iron Man and Captain America hate each other, and the guy who does the bow and arrows and the Hulk guy
Hawkeye.
are fighting over the blonde or the redhead chick, and they're all just fighting all the time. And then about like 3/4 of the way through the movie, they learn how to put away their differences and work together to save the world. And then the next Avengers movie, they all hate each other again for the exact same reasons that they hated each other in the first movie. There's no character development.
Yeah.
Like, in their individual movies, they get some character development a little bit, but not really.
But not overall.
No. Like, there's no actual change.
Right. So that would be tough in a book series. So if you stacked those all up like a book series, it would be difficult because you wouldn't see them in book 2 being any different.
Right.
Yeah.
That's one of my biggest pet peeves with the Avengers.
Yeah, I can see that, definitely. All right, you want to take number 4?
Yeah. So, goals. The protagonist should have clear goals, desires, or needs. This gives your character a purpose and drives the action of the story. These goals can be anything from saving the world to navigating everyday life, depending on the nature of your story.
Yeah. The character has to have something to do.
Yeah, or else they're just like waking up and doing the exact same thing every day, and nobody wants to read about that.
Nobody wants to read about that because that's their own story.
Yeah, exactly.
We read books to get out of our own story.
To escape.
That's right.
Yeah.
So number 5 is agency. A compelling protagonist makes decisions and takes actions that influence the plot rather than being merely reactive or passive. They should have a certain degree of control over their destiny, even if the circumstances they find themselves in are beyond their control. So you don't want somebody who's just going along and taking the punches and not doing anything about it.
Right.
That would be a terrible story. You need somebody who eventually reacts. They can start out that way, but kind of going along with the growth arc, eventually they're going to stand up to the bully and do something about it.
Which makes it a little bit difficult sometimes when you're writing characters, because you feel like, oh, this has been done before. But, I mean, that's one of those things where it has to be done.
Yeah.
Like, you can't not.
Well, consider also that people don't read books because they're tired of reading the same fiction story over again.
It's true.
A lot of people read the exact same story
Over
with different
over.
names.
Yeah.
So...
minor detail changes.
Right, minor detail changes. So there is something to be said about the good old story tropes and arcs and all of that.
Yeah. All right, so strengths. While a protagonist should have flaws, they also need strengths that allow them to confront the challenges they face. These strengths can be physical, intellectual, or moral, among others. So they can't be a puny wimp all the time.
Right, they gotta have something. Even the puny wimp stories, they'll have something in their back pocket.
Like intelligence. Or...
Right. So my character in the book that I'm writing, he's kind of this way. So he lives in a magic world, and he's not a magic user. So he's kind of down by that, and then he's kind of a runt, skinny, wiry. But the thing he does, which kind of gets around all of these weaknesses, he is wiry, so he can run really fast. And so these bullies are always chasing him, but he's able to get away from them most times.
Yeah.
Because he's learned to escape the bullies. So number 7 is backstory. A protagonist's past can significantly impact their character traits, goals, and actions in the story. A well-developed backstory can provide depth to a character, explain their motivations, and make their actions more believable.
What's bad is when you just info dump the backstory in the first chapter.
Yeah, don't do that.
I've been tempted, but I have not.
Yeah, we definitely don't want to do that. So, a good backstory is good. And even in planning to write a book, it can be helpful to write out some of your character's backstory, just so that you get an idea of how they would respond and react in different situations. And then you can work in some of it in good opportune times, but not, as you said, info dumping it.
Example. Welcome to the Brandon Sander Fans Podcast. I'm currently reading The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, and a lot of the mystery and also the intrigue is one of the main characters, Kaladin.
Kaladin, yeah.
And we're reading about him in present day, and you're kind of confused about why he's reacting the way he is. And then there's also simultaneously a plot running from when he's like 12 years old.
Right.
So you're kind of getting his backstory and his present story at the same time.
Yeah, they're like flashbacks in a movie.
And you're like trying to connect in the middle, like what happened to make him the way that he is now from the way that he was before.
Right. So
I think that's a really good use of backstory.
It is. I thought that I thought that Sanderson's use of that was really good. I've seen it done poorly, and it's just confusing and annoying, but specifically in The Way of Kings, I think he does a really good job with that.
Yeah.
And he drives both of those storylines together towards a common goal. So by the time you reach the apex of the book, like that's when you're getting to the end of the flashback stories to know, oh, this is why he's gone through all of this and he is where he is.
You know what I hate? When people try to drop backstory in the form of a dream. And I'm like, when in your life have you ever dreamt something that exactly happened to you many years ago?
Never.
Never.
Literally never.
Literally never. Maybe in the instance of like severe trauma would people like relive something, but even then it's not exactly the same every time.
Right.
It's never exactly how it happened.
Yeah, dream always modifies something.
Your brain doesn't remember all the details.
Right.
I just think that's stupid. They're like telling an entire backstory and then it's like, and then she woke up and she was like sweating and scared, and I'm like, I don't think that's how dreams work. Try again.
Yeah, try again. All right, is this you or me?
I think it's me.
All right.
All right, number 8 is consistency. While a protagonist should grow and change, their characters should also remain consistent, unless there's a good reason for a sudden change. This makes the character believable and helps readers stay invested in their journey. So change the characters, but don't change them too much.
That's right. I think we had the same one for antagonists. So the point of this is you don't want to just make wild, crazy changes that are outside of the character and who they are, unless they're a character that is like that. But
I have read a book like that before, and I'm not going to mention the title.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't.
But it was so unsettling and just rage-inducing. And I'm like, what in the world am I reading right now? It was really depressing.
Yeah.
And I did not want to finish that book. I wanted to put it down and never finish it. But, you know, gotta commit.
Gotta commit. All right, number 9 is empathy. So a compelling protagonist often elicits empathy from the reader. This doesn't mean the protagonist always has to be likable or good, but readers should be able to understand their motivations and feel some sort of emotional connection to the protagonist. So this is kind of the same as relatability, but a little different. So
yeah, because you can feel empathy for someone without relating to their
Right.
situation.
yeah, so just having a sense of you can understand why they're doing what they're doing, and why they're fighting this particular battle.
This
Or
is also
whatever.
one of those things that's really good for antagonists.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's even better for antagonists, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because if you can empathize with a bad guy, then that just makes that bad guy
Because you could see
seemingly more
yourself becoming that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have a very flat, evil person, it's almost just a cartoon, and it's not as scary.
Right.
But if it's someone that, like, could have lived next to you, then
Right.
that's kind of scary. All right, last one.
All right, uniqueness. A compelling protagonist often stands out. They might have a distinctive voice, an interesting background, unusual skills, or an unexpected approach to problems. Which is actually another thing that I struggle with, because you have to write someone who's different than everybody else without being like, I'm different than everyone else. It's like, my name is Lilac Unique.
Right.
My parents are dead and I'm the chosen one.
So it's similar to people in our culture, just everyday culture, who strive to be different, but then they end up looking like all the other people in that specific group.
That try to be different, yeah.
Right? Like emo or goth or, whatever it is. It could be, Barbie girls or...
Yeah. In this day and age, we call those pick-me girls.
Oh, really? Okay.
Pick me, I'm different. I wear Converse to prom.
In the case of J.K. Rowling's, then you just put a lightning scar on his forehead. He stands out.
He's got funny hair.
Speaking of, let's talk about some examples of protagonists.
Let's.
So Harry Potter, I just brought him up.
Harry Potter.
So do you think Harry Potter's a good protagonist or a bad protagonist?
I think that Harry Potter is a good protagonist when in conjunction with Ron and Hermione.
Yes.
On his own, he would immediately die. Harry is not smart enough to survive the Harry Potter books without Ron and Hermione.
But that's part of what makes him a good protagonist.
Yeah, I mean, he's flawed.
He's flawed.
And kind of stupid a little bit sometimes.
A little stupid,
Honestly, I think he should have been a Hufflepuff, but we're not going to talk about that right now. I think that what makes the Harry Potter books so great is that each of the three, the trio, contribute something different.
Yeah.
Even though it's kind of hard to see what Ron contributes, he's just kind of the comic relief sometimes, but he does have good traits that he adds to the group. So they all kind of combine to make one singular awesome protagonist. Yeah, but they all have to work together.
A group protagonist.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that. Yeah, Bilbo Baggins.
Yep.
So I've got actually Bilbo, Frodo, and Samwise.
Yeah.
So Bilbo and Frodo, if you haven't read these stories, then go read them. So Bilbo is Frodo's uncle. So Bilbo's the protagonist in The Hobbit, which is the first story, and it comes before The Lord of the Rings, which is Frodo. He's the protagonist.
So something that I really like about some flaws that we have with those characters, specifically Bilbo and Frodo, is that they are swayed by the ring.
Yes.
They are tempted, and they do fail to resist temptation, which is relatable.
Right.
Because we are tempted daily,
right.
And we also fail to resist temptation, even though we know it's stupid. And, they have consequences for that, but then they overcome them, and I think that's what makes them a great protagonist.
Yeah, and part of their flaws is they're such little, humble, unassuming people that when they do use the ring, the magic of the ring has an effect on them that isn't like world shattering. Mm-hmm. So it's not in the movies. So if you've only seen the movies, you probably don't know this because it's in the books. But the magic of the ring impacts different people differently. Mm-hmm. So if Gandalf would have taken the ring for himself, he would have become just the ultimate wizard and probably just slain everybody in the world. The same with Lady Galadriel, which is why she didn't want to take the ring. Or she did, but she didn't. She refused. But when the hobbits take the ring, they're so small and unassuming, and they're really good at hiding. And so one of the things that the ring gives to them is becoming invisible. Mm-hmm. And then it also makes their life really long. So those two things don't make them like world conquerors or anything.
Right.
I mean, it's really handy if you want to be a thief.
Mm-hmm.
Sneaking in to take a gem out of a mountain that's held by a dragon or something like that.
Yeah.
And then some people would say that in The Lord of the Rings, Sam is actually the protagonist.
Honestly, I agree.
Because Sam drags Frodo.
Sam was
to the
holding
mountain.
Frodo's leash, is
Right.
what was happening. Sam was the voice of reason.
That's right. Who's watching over Frodo?
Right.
Which is more pronounced in the movies. They kind of made it a little comical. So in the movies, Frodo's always putting on the ring and just wandering off. Like, really? Again?
Frodo needs one of those little monkey backpacks where the tail is the leash.
Right. The books aren't that bad, but
No.
But Sam is the really just ultimate friend.
Well, Sam is, at the end, the one who actually gets the ring there.
Yeah.
Not Frodo.
Yeah, because Sam has to carry him up the mountain.
Right.
Because he's just not wanting to go up there. And then he gets him there, and then bad things happen.
Mommy said Sam is her favorite. So I see you have, on this list, you have Wax from Mistborn, but also Vin.
Yes.
From Mistborn, I think is a great protagonist.
Tell me about her. I don't remember those as well.
So she is flawed.
Yeah.
She's very...
She comes from the street, doesn't she?
Mm-hmm, yeah, she's like a little thief.
Street urchin.
Street rat thing.
Riff-raff.
Finds out she's Mistborn, and Kelsier takes her under his wing, and they're using her to kind of infiltrate the high-ranking class.
Right, yeah.
And so they teach her how to be a lady and while she's learning things. And Kelsier is ultimately manipulating her into, like, as a means to his end, which is very not Gandalf, very Dumbledore of him. But Vin is very selfish at the beginning, especially. And even towards the end, when her and Elend are fighting the wars, basically towards the end of the trilogy, spoiler alert if you haven't read the Mistborn books, maybe skip ahead a little bit, but towards the end of the Mistborn books, Vin basically becomes this unstoppable force. Like, she's just demolishing armies by herself.
Yeah.
And then, Elend ends up being Mistborn, I think.
Yeah, he does.
And then they're just, like, dual, like, demolishing armies, which is awesome. But then they're also still, like, wrestling with personal matters and the rightness of, well, is my reason for fighting these people better than their reason for fighting me? And is me demolishing this army making me just as bad as they are?
Right, yeah.
So they have a lot of, internal, and it does get pretty religious there at the end, before what's-his-face turns into God.
Right.
And that was really terrible. But I think Vin is a great protagonist.
Yeah.
Because she does grow a lot throughout the books. She kind of grows from this, like, very unsure of herself street urchin into a queen.
Yeah.
And then dead, but,
Have you read all of the Wax and Wayne series?
No, I just read the first one.
Just the first one?
Yeah.
Okay, so in that series, Wax, he has a similar moment in that series. I think it's the third book. So he finds the bands of mourning, which allow him to be basically Mistborn.
Okay.
But it's not like he's Mistborn. It's this thing that he takes, which imbues the power of Mistborn on him, and so he becomes this unstoppable force. But the great thing about him in that moment is, like, he doesn't use it to fix all the problems of the book. He doesn't even kill the bad guy that's right in front of him. He just uses it to subdue him enough so that, like, he can walk away from the fight, and then he puts the power aside.
Good for him.
Yeah. So I thought that was a really good mark of a good protagonist, is they don't take ultimate power just for the sake of being powerful, especially if they know they can't handle that power without it going to their heads.
Right. Yeah.
And in that series, Wayne is Wax's sidekick, and he also, I think, is a great protagonist.
He loves hats.
Because he loves hats, and he's talk about the uniqueness.
Yeah.
He is one of the most unique characters I have ever read. So he always has different accents.
And disguises.
And he's always stealing things. Yeah. The dude is a thief.
No, it's a trade.
It's a trade. So he gives you, like, half an eaten sandwich and takes, like, your hat or something really expensive, and he considers that a good trade.
Yeah.
So that just gives a lot of fun to those characters, I think. Luke Skywalker in the Star Wars trilogy is a good protagonist. He's kind of a whiny baby. A lot of people don't like him.
Just like his dad.
Just like his dad, yes.
Falls in love with his sister.
But he kind of has that story of, like, he's just a nobody living on a farm, kind of the hero's journey. And so then Ben Kenobi finds him and, trains him to be a Jedi, and then he goes on to fight and win. And he does have a growth arc. Most of it is in his growth in the Jedi arts. So there's not a whole lot of character development in that as far as, like, emotional or inner things that he's wrestling with. The biggest thing is, like, Darth Vader's his dad, and he realizes that, oh no! But, like, that's about as deep as it gets. So most of his growth just comes from training in this art and becoming the best Jedi that's been around for a while.
That's another thing that is very common for protagonists, is they're the best.
Yes.
Like, accidentally the best, or, like, just... Like Harry Potter, like, just has, like, this uncanny talent for magic.
Right.
Like, it's just part of him.
He's just innately good at it.
Which is probably partly because he has part of Voldemort's soul in him, but,
To be honest, yeah.
I think he probably got a little more mediocre after they killed the Voldemort part inside of him.
Yeah.
But I digress.
Right, yeah. So why do you think that is? Like, all the protagonist people, right, have to be the best?
Because that's what we want to be.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say, yes.
Because we want to be the best. And being able to experience that through escapism is why we read books.
Right.
Because we want to be the best. We want to be the protagonist. We want to be the hero.
Yeah, you've heard of these surveys and studies that people have done where they ask people where they would rate themselves. Are they below average, or above average? And 99% of people say they're above average.
Incorrect.
That's statistically inaccurate.
Wrong.
We cannot all be above average.
That would make us all average.
That's right. The book series that I've been reading, the Green Ember series, this guy's a really great writer. And so basically every character in that book is a protagonist, I think. But one of the main characters is Pickett Longtreader. They're bunnies, if you don't know about the stories. So Pickett starts out the first book. He's afraid of heights. He's kind of timid and kind of just hides under his sister's shadow and follows her everywhere. And then they lose their family. The bad guys attack, and they're just thrust into the middle of this battle that they didn't even know was going on. And so then Pickett has to deal with tons of really angsty emotional issues. He's angry at the world. He's frustrated that he didn't protect his little baby brother who got taken away. And so during this first book, he's dealing with all of these issues. And then by the end of the series, which I'm in the last book, the fourth book, by this time, Pickett has become basically the superhero of the bunny army. So he infiltrates one of these cities that's being held by Morbin Blackhawk. He's a hawk, and he's a tyrant, but he uses lesser tyrants, bunny tyrants, to basically have this communist city. And Pickett infiltrates it, and he's going around, and people find out who he is, and they're just shocked because there's all these heroes' tales about this guy Pickett who can fly and can kill hawks and basically do anything, and he's invincible. And so it's really interesting too, because you see him have to deal with his own sort of hero worship, which he does gracefully, and he's a humble bunny, but he also deals with trying to be that hero, but not wanting to be the hero. But he's a great protagonist, I think. So I've really enjoyed reading about him. Yeah. His sister is also a great protagonist.
Let's bring up the second book that we talk about every podcast.
Hunger Games.
Katniss Everdeen. Katniss Everdeen is a really interesting protagonist because she is one of those protagonists that she is her own problem a lot of the time. And sometimes you can tell and sometimes you can't, because it's first person, so she is such an unreliable narrator.
Right.
She completely misinterprets so many things. And you can tell.
Yeah.
I really don't think that's what was happening, but the way that the story is told, it's obvious that she's supposed to be, an unreliable narrator. But she is very, she's simultaneously selfless and selfish, which I think is very interesting. In the first Hunger Games, she's very, very much, I need to win the Hunger Games so that I can go take care of my sister Prim, which is selfless.
Right.
But then also, when it comes to the point where they announce that if both tributes from the same district still are alive at the end, they can both win. The only reason she goes to find Peeta, which you only know if you've read the books, is because she knows everybody would hate her in her district if she let him die. That's the only reason she goes back to save him. Not because she likes him, not because she loves him. Because she's everybody's going to hate me if I let this guy die.
That's
so
funny.
Now I have to go save him. even though he's going to be a big pain in the butt, the whole time because he can't do anything.
Yeah. That doesn't come out in the movies. I've only seen the movies.
Yeah.
That doesn't really come out in
her struggle, her internal struggle with PETA is such a long story arc.
Yeah.
And the really interesting thing about her character arc is it goes from not innocent, I would say, but maybe a little bit, to from a little bit innocent but still angry at the world and this dystopia that they live in, to completely mentally unstable. That's the end point.
Really?
She's just her brain is just demolished. She is completely unstable. She has so much trauma. There's no way she's ever going to recover. But her and PETA live demented forever after, It's really interesting, and something that I really like about her character arc, because, and I think that's something that makes her unique, is because the story doesn't veer away from this trauma happened to me, but I'm just going to go back to being normal.
Right.
This trauma happened to me, and I am permanently affected for the rest of my life. However, we're going to move on the best that we can.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good part about her character arc.
That is interesting that the author chose to do that, because so many of them, the hero's journey, you come back a hero.
Yeah, no, she doesn't.
You've just beaten everybody, and
she doesn't come back a hero in the end. She is ostracized from the government. They kick her out, and she goes and lives in the woods by herself.
Oh, she's probably better off.
She is, but it's just such an interesting story, and that's what I love about it. It's not a happily ever after. It's a reality ever after.
Yeah.
But she's a great protagonist.
I like that, having to deal with trauma things. So Pickett Longtreader in the Green Ember series, he has a similar situation. So he has been traumatized, he and his sister, but they've grown through it and have become part of the battle.
Mm-hmm.
But at one point, I'm going to try to not spoil this because it's a really good story and you might want to read it.
Mm-hmm.
But a good friend of his is contemplating doing something, and he counsels him one way that ends up taking the guy's life. He basically has to live with the fact that it was his advice that got this guy killed. And then they bring him back the scarf of this guy, that his friend that died. And so he has to wear it for the rest of the time as a reminder that he got his friend killed.
That's depressing.
So his mentor, or actually no, it's his uncle. So his uncle is one of his mentors, but he's counseling him through it, and basically says, you can't walk away from this trauma. You have to bear it, but you need to use it and focus it on the evil that we're fighting. Yes, you messed up, but you can do better now.
Yeah.
So Doctor Who, do you think he's a good protagonist or a bad one?
Honestly, I feel like in Doctor Who, even though he's technically the main character, I feel like Doctor Who, the Doctor is not the protagonist. His
Really?
companion is the protagonist.
Oh, interesting.
The Doctor is Deus Ex Machina for every episode.
For every episode.
There's no way that the Doctor isn't going to win. I feel like the story arcs follow the companions more than they actually follow the Doctor.
Yeah, you may be right.
Which I think is what makes each of them unique, in how they respond to that.
Right.
Because even though the companions are the ones that are temporary, they're the ones that are kind of in and out of his life.
And they're really the ones...
We're the ones that we relate to.
Right, and you're living this story through them.
Right.
Not through the Doctor.
Because we're not going to be an alien with two hearts who's literally the best at everything.
Right.
But wouldn't we love to be swept away by some charming alien man to go travel time and space and save the world?
Well, I wouldn't.
Well, maybe not a charming alien man, but you know what I mean? Wouldn't you love to go travel the world and through time and space and
absolutely
fight Daleks?
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. That's good.
Okay, one of the best protagonists ever.
Okay.
Avatar Aang.
Avatar Aang. I believe Aang can save the world.
Avatar Aang, I think, is a great protagonist. He has a great character arc.
He has a massive character arc, I think. Yeah.
He goes through a lot of trauma. He goes through a lot of growth, both physically and mentally.
Yeah, emotionally.
Also, Zuko. We
Well,
love him.
Zuko's not a protagonist.
No, he's not, but great character arc there. Anyway, Aang has a great character, and I think he's a good protagonist because he can fluctuate. He kind of like matches the mood.
Right,
he can
yeah.
be goofy and fun and kind of be like the comic relief, or he can be, like freaking powerhouse man and just take
Yeah.
someone down.
He's very relatable, especially for a cartoon, because he is a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And even for older kids that like to watch it, like us, he's relatable because you're in this magical world where people are bending elements and stuff, and so it's strange to us. But this kid has to kind of learn all the elements,
Right.
except for air, which he already kind of knows, but not real well. So you're kind of learning all these things through him
Right.
as he goes along.
And he doesn't want to be the Avatar.
He doesn't want to be the Avatar. That's
He
right.
wants peace. He doesn't want to fight a war,
Yeah.
and this is what he's been thrust into, which is really great parallel for Korra,
Yeah.
in which she wants to fight and she's in a time of peace,
Yeah.
which is hilarious. And I wasn't as huge a fan of Korra, but what about Ransom
Oh, Ransom in
out of the Silent
Out of the
Planet?
Silent Planet. He's a great protagonist for sort of the tag-along venture voyeurism because he has no idea what's going on, and he just gets kidnapped and taken to Mars, which they know is Malacandra. You're reading the story through his eyes, and he's figuring out and discovering this new world. And then, he's taken by these two evil men, and so he has to wrestle with escaping from them and also dealing with this alien planet and trying to figure out what's going on there. He's not a typical protagonist in the sense of there's like this great evil that he's battling, because for most of the book, he's just really trying to get away,
Right.
either from aliens that he thinks are trying to eat him or from these two bad guys. So he's just running and discovering. But through it all, he's not just passive.
Mm-hmm.
He's actively, and he's a philologist. So he knows how to learn languages, which is
Yeah.
useful because he's able to learn the language of this planet. And
The Rasa.
the Hrasa, yeah. I just recently read that. It's really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a good protagonist.
Yeah. Pride and Prejudice. Elizabeth Bennet. I know you haven't read Pride and Prejudice.
I have not read Pride and Prejudice or watched the movie.
Elizabeth Bennet has a lot of character flaws because she's very quick to kind of come back at you.
Yeah.
Like she gets insulted and she'll immediately kind of come back at you with something just as insulting, even though, it's inappropriate
Yeah.
to like talk to men or whatever. And she's good. I like her because, it is obviously about the book. Like the book is called Pride and Prejudice. It's about overcoming pride and her overcoming prejudice. So he's overcoming his pride and she's overcoming her prejudice.
I never even knew that about the book. So
Yeah. So Mr. Darcy falls in love with Elizabeth, but he's too proud to admit that he loves someone beneath his level.
his station.
Right. And he actually says that to her. At one point, he proposes to her, and he's like, "You're below my station. You don't make enough money. Your parents are ridiculous. Your sisters are ridiculous, and I shouldn't even like you, but here I am, and I want to marry you." And she's like, "What the heck is wrong with you?"
What
No.
kind of proposal is that?
Exactly. It's basically what she says. So, and then she's overcoming her prejudice of these uppity people who, don't care about, actual people and don't want to actually connect with people. So they kind of meet in the middle.
Yeah.
It's a sweet story. I like it.
So I did watch. I didn't read the book or anything, but I did watch the play that my daughter starred in, Avery, Little Women.
Yep.
So that's kind of similar. So she played Jo, who I'm guessing was like the main
Yeah.
protagonist lady.
The March sisters. Yeah.
Yeah.
The antagonist in Little Women, I think, is Jo herself. Like, she's both the antagonist and the protagonist. Because she's just, like, trying to do things and then getting in her way, and then
Right.
trying to do things and getting in her way. It's also just kind of one of those living a life stories.
Yeah.
Not as much like an overcoming something.
Yeah, but it's written as like a literary protagonist. So if there's not actual antagonists, then like you have to struggle with something, even if it's your own flaws and your own
Right.
consequences.
It's very much the same with like a lot of those books, like Jane Eyre, Little Women, Pride and Prejudice. You know, they're all spunky, outspoken women who they don't want to marry anybody because they just want to live their life and be a writer or ride horses or whatever. And then nobody could ever love me. And then, you know, all of a sudden here comes Hunk Mania with billions of dollars. And
Mr.
they just
Right.
accidentally fall in love.
Oops. Turns out women do love Prince Charming.
I don't think women will ever not love Prince Charming. It's just kind of built into us.
Yep. It's part of God's design.
Kill the dragon, get the girl, man.
That's right. So, Ragan, what are you reading, or have you recently finished?
I am currently reading still The Way of Kings. I'm about 70% through at this point.
That's great.
I'm also reading The Sword of Destiny, which is a book in the Witcher series.
Oh, okay.
Actually, this is kind of funny. I started reading, I can't remember the name of the series, but it's called The City of Bones. I think it's like a Shadowhunter series is what it's called. It's a YA series. I started reading it, and I got about 5 chapters in, and then it skipped to chapter 10.
Oh, yeah,
and
you
then
were
it was
telling
like
me about this.
chapter 10, 11, and 12 from a different book, like a different book in the series. And then it just went back to like chapter like 14, 15, 16 of the actual book. And so it was missing like 5 chapters. And so now I have to like go buy a different one so I can actually read it. But I was going to try and read that, but then that happened. So I haven't fixed that problem yet. So I'm just reading The Witcher.
Right. That's good.
Yep.
Anything else?
No. I mean, The Hobbit in
Yeah.
air quotes.
Yeah, we're not really making progress on that.
No.
So I'm reading, as I mentioned earlier, the Green Ember series. So I'm on the final book, Ember's End. I'm listening to it on audio. I've got about 2 hours left in the book. It is just about the climax of the book. It's really good. He's ratcheted up the conflict so high that at this point I'm like, I don't know how he's going to fix this. Like, this is too big. So I know the conclusion's probably going to be really good. So reading that, I've finished recently Out of the Silent Planet by C.S. Lewis.
Right on.
I'm reading that for men's group. Excellent book. And so I've just started Paralandria, which is the second book of the Space Trilogy, but some people don't like to call it the Space Trilogy. They call it the Ransom Trilogy. I don't care. That's for the snooty literary types. And I've still kind of got on the back burner Atlas Shrugged, which I'm definitely going to finish that this year.
You sure?
Yes.
You gonna finish your book this year?
It's possible. I'm not going to say likely, but it's possible. Are you going to finish your book?
I'm really gonna try, man. Probably not, though. Honestly.
Yeah. We got to do better.
Yeah, we really do.
We say that every time. Thank you for joining us in this episode of Writing on Caffeine. We hope you'll join us again in 2 weeks. Please subscribe wherever you find podcasts. If you are so inclined, leave us a review. 5-star reviews are preferable. And be sure to visit the website, writingoncaffeine.com, where you can view the show notes and subscribe to our email list so that you never miss an episode.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I think I was just irritated by Cora.
And they're driving cars. What's that about?
Yeah. I wasn't into the big steampunk thing.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway.